You may have noticed that with all our religious symbols on the windows, we have no symbol for atheism. I thought maybe it was a blank window, but there is actually an atheist symbol. It's kind of the atomic design with an A in the middle. A guy named John Buchan said, quote, "An atheist is a man who has no invisible means of support." According to an article in the Journal of Mental Health, Religion and Culture in 2011, atheists are America's least trusted group, and stereotypes are common. Atheists are described as logical, skeptical, nonconformist, cynical, and joyless, and rarely experiencing awe. Some Christians may view them as devoid of morals. Some years ago, there was a survey in Texas that rated atheists a notch below child molesters. However, the same article found that when compared, our atheists, Christians, and Buddhists were similar in their reported well-being, empathy, and other personality scales. Where they differed strongly were scales assessing spirituality and magical ideation. Where atheists rejected the concepts of spirituality and magical beliefs, atheists responded to the question, have you ever felt wonderment or felt as if you were part of something greater than yourself? 71% said yes, citing nature, science, music, art, and human cooperation. I personally would call that spirituality, just not the religious kind. They explained their lack of belief as a preference for logic, rationality, and evidence. Carl Sagan said, "Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality." Another definition of atheism is the absence of belief that any deities exist. Somewhere between 4 and 17% of Americans define themselves as atheists, while 51% of the people in Sweden identify as atheist. This disparity in the percentage of Americans may be due to the negative attitude in the U.S. toward atheists and a hesitancy to admit to it. I've noticed the overlap in tenets of several of the religious beliefs, especially humanism, Buddhist, agnostic, etc. Since we UUs have no creed that we all adhere to, we run the gamut from adherence to any of these to atheism. Many of us are what Catholics call cafeteria Catholics, who pick and choose from various tenets and choose to make up their own minds. My mother was Catholic and raised us as such. Church every Sunday, no meat on Friday, even if you were on the road traveling and the only restaurant was a barbecue joint. My father was atheist and, of course, ate the ribs. In my 10 or 12-year-old mind, that was obviously an early red flag about the arbitrary rules of religion. My mother's faith had a strong element of habit, as it was the way she was raised. Other than the trappings of Catholicism, she was not particularly religious. When my brother was killed in Vietnam in 1967, she abandoned Catholicism as it offered no solace for that loss. When she was near death herself, she rejected even the notion of calling a priest. She was not afraid of dying or going to hell or looking forward to heaven. By then, even though she never expressed it, I believe she was an atheist too. My own conversion from Catholic to atheist happened at about age 17 in my first year of college. Away from home, the church habit made no sense to me anymore. I did try to keep going, but the message ceased to make sense as I studied more science and enlarged my world. At first, it was a rejection of Catholicism in particular, but evolved to reject all organized religion. A friend who was UU finally convinced me to attend the first UU church in Dallas when I was in my early 30s. It took some convincing, but when I finally attended, it was a revelation that there was a church, in quotes, and a community that I could relate to. That UU church in the middle of the Bible Belt was an oasis of like-minded souls. I've also learned as a UU not to cringe at the C, G, and J words. Just attach my own interpretation to them and go on. Ursula Le Guin has a nice essay titled Belief in Belief. In it, she says that the idea that only belief sees the world as lovely and wonderful, while the scientific reliance on cold, hard facts take all the color and wonder out of it. The idea that understanding of science threatens and weakens religious or spiritual insight is false. Her premise is that the priest and scientist compete for power and control of human minds, while many scientists, whether religious or not, accept the coexistence of religion in its own sphere and go on with what they're doing. And on the religious side, many accept the fact that science operates on hypotheses which lead to theories, not absolute knowledge, always adapting to new evidence. Unfortunately, insistence that all truth resides in the Bible creates an unnecessary divide. Conversely, the opposite extreme of radical atheism is equally divisive, not using the word belief in matters of fact, but keeping it where it belongs in matters of faith and secular hope would avoid a lot of unnecessary pain. The whole kerfluffle over evolution is the example of misuse of the word belief. Opinion does not trump fact. To quote Carl Sagan again, he said, "I don't want to believe, I want to know." Here are some famous atheists. Britney Spears, Brad Pitt, Bill Maher, Margaret Sanger, Jodie Foster, James Watson, Gene Wilder, Oliver Sacks, Ayn Rand, no surprise there, Frank Zappa, Kevin Bacon. Albert Einstein denied being an atheist, but described himself as a secular humanist having no belief in a personal God. He stated, "The idea of a personal God is quite alien to me and seems even naive. About life and death," he said, "one life is enough for me." Susan B. Anthony said, "I distrust people who know well what God wants them to do because I notice that it always coincides with their own desires." Seneca the Younger said, "Religion is regarded by the people as true, the wise as false, and by rulers as useful." And from Gloria Steinem, "It's an incredible con job when you think about it, to believe in something now in exchange for something after death. Even corporations with their reward systems don't try to make it posthumous." And finally, Kurt Vonnegut said, "I am an atheist, or at best a Unitarian who winds up in churches quite a lot." That's me in a nutshell. My miracles involve the way seeds sprout in spring and eventually lead to tomatoes. How immense and unknowable the extent of the universe is, the natural world and its amazing complexity, and the kindness of friends and strangers. I am beyond grateful to be in the company of you wonderful people who accept the diversity of anyone who walks through these doors. Thank you.